right, well, welcome back to ACLU on the Hill. We're here with Marina Lowe at the close of it's now the third week of the session, or still the second?
Unfortunately, we still have 5 more to go.
It's easy to lose track. Can you tell us about some of the bills that the ACLU has been working on this week?
Yeah, it's been another busy week at the Capitol. The ACLU is involved in a number of different issues. We testified on an abortion bill this week. Also, it would be fun for us to sort of get into 2 different resolutions dealing with family separation, one in the House, one in the Senate. Let's sort of dig into the differing results for those 2 resolutions.
That sounds good. Let's start with the abortion bill. Now, this was, I believe, the 15-week abortion bill, Representative Cheryl Acton's bill. Or no, wait, I'm sorry. This is actually the Down syndrome abortion bill from Representative Carrie Ann Lisenby. This is a bill we saw last year. It didn't make it out of the session last year. I believe it sort of ran out of time in the Senate. But how is it doing this year? Has anything changed with the bill, and anything changed with the ACLU or our allies' perspectives on it?
Yeah, it's easy to get confused because there are a number of abortion bills this session, unfortunately, here in Utah. So yes, this bill is largely the same as the bill that we saw last year, run by Representative Carrie Ann Lisenby last year and again this year. There is one notable difference in the language, however. There's some language at the very bottom of the bill. It's what we call trigger language, which essentially says that even if the legislature passes the bill, the portion that pertains to a ban on abortions doesn't go into effect until a court issues a binding decision. And so that would mean, practically speaking, either the U.S. Supreme Court or a court here in Utah if there's no appeal that is granted by a higher court.
So is this one way for the sponsors of this bill to sort of get around the lawsuit argument? Because there wouldn't be an immediate lawsuit. It would have to wait until the bill goes into effect, which would then be when there's some sort of constitutional shift in how this is viewed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a way to get around the lawsuit. I think another way to look at it is also an acknowledgement of the constitutional flaws with this bill, and sort of understanding and conceding that it will immediately invite litigation.
And I believe some of the fiscal note information we saw was that it would be at least $1 to $2 million to pursue this case up through the appeals courts and things like that.
Yes, definitely. It would be very expensive for the state to take on this issue.
Just to touch base on the 15-week abortion bill, do you see that bill moving forward this session or any changes in that?
I think there's certainly a possibility. The bill has obviously been published. There have been some public events associated with it. It has not yet been assigned to a committee, and so has not begun the legislative process in full.
Now, let's go back to the second point you brought up, which was the tale of 2 committees. There were 2 resolutions, and resolutions don't have the same effect as laws, right? They're more like pronouncements of the legislature. There was one in the Senate, and there was one in the House. The one in the Senate didn't go anywhere in front of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, but the one in the House did, and you were there for that hearing. It was just yesterday or the day before. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the bills were sort of the same spirit. The language was a little bit different. As you mentioned, resolutions don't have the same weight as law. In this instance, the resolution directed our federal delegation to receive this information about how the state of Utah feels about family separation and the values that we hold dear around keeping families and children and parents together. The Committee in Health Government Operations was surprisingly receptive to the bill. There were some language changes made to appease, I think, some of the more conservative members of the committee who were concerned about focusing too much on immigration, viewing that sort of as a political hot potato, and so focusing a lot of the language on asylum seekers, refugees, things of that nature. And then with those small changes made, the bill did pass unanimously out of the committee.
And I was there for the Senate hearing on a similar bill, Representative Gene Davis. Senator Gene Davis, that's correct. It was about family separation, and those political overtones were left in that bill, and the reception from the committee was quite different. In fact, there was one senator who sort of said, well, maybe this family separation thing was a bit overblown, and again, another one said that this was a day late and a dollar short in terms of what we were dealing with. So it really kind of depends on sometimes the tone and language in a bill, and then sometimes the prep work that a lawmaker does beforehand. Is that often true?
I think that's absolutely the case. And some of it's luck of the draw, the committee that you receive, the place where your bill ultimately gets heard.
And actually, that's a bit of inside baseball. Can we go into that a bit? The Rules Committee in both the House and the Senate determine which committees bills are heard by. And that can actually be very important, right? There are certain committees that are more receptive or have more expertise. Have you seen that at play this year already in terms of bills going to committees that people know they're not going to make it out of?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that perception that there's certain bills where, certain committees, where bills are more likely to get killed or more likely to get advanced. Typically, bills are supposed to get assigned to committees that sort of jive with the subject matter. For example, a bill dealing with abortion, you might think would go to Health and Human Services. Carrie Ann Lisenby's bill went to Judiciary, a committee that she chairs. Now, it's not to say that that's entirely inappropriate. There are obviously legal questions associated with that issue because in most situations when the legislature undertakes an abortion ban or restriction, litigation does follow. Nevertheless, one may wonder why those types of bills get assigned in the way that they do.
Let's go into a little bit more inside baseball, and that's actually a game the ACLU plays very well when it comes to working on bills before they actually make it to committee. And that is helping in the drafting process and understanding the fiscal note or the legal challenges. How does the ACLU do that? It's not something that gets a lot of attention or light of day. Can you describe, and I understand if you want to be a little bit secretive about it, how you work on bills before they actually make it out?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the process starts long before the opening day of the legislative session. An idea is developed, and oftentimes there are lots of conversations, perhaps even in the year leading up to a bill being passed, with various stakeholders, getting input, identifying problems, perhaps presenting bills before governmental committees who have a stake in the legislation, working closely with agencies that will be providing fiscal analysis to the bill, which essentially means putting a price tag on what implementation will actually cost. So there's lots of that sort of stuff that happens long before the bill sort of is assigned to a committee. And then even once that happens, a good example of that is a bill that we're working on related to electronic privacy, HB 57. The bill was heard in committee, but since that hearing, there have been numerous conversations with agencies and organizations who have concerns, who are providing suggested language, literally, on the order of 50 emails circulating back and forth, trying to get the language just right. So there's a lot of sort of back and forth that happens before a committee ever even sees a bill and sees the language. And then, of course, they can make changes as well.
True. And they can even make changes on the floor as things go. So it's really interesting because I think a lot of the public sees just the committee hearings and the floor debate as really where the action is. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and we're glad that you're there for the ACLU to help kind of put our ideas in action. One last question, and that is that Medicaid expansion, that issue is now done. The House voted today to pass SB 96. There's some conference committee work that will happen, but likely this is an issue that is going to move away. That opens up a lot of oxygen in the legislative session. What do you see moving forward as some of the other issues that will take up the next couple of weeks of action?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's actually good that they're tackling the issue that was taking up all the air in the room early on, because I think it really did sap away a lot of energy from a lot of other issues. And so now there's room to sort of get into some of these meatier issues. The ACLU, of course, is pursuing a number of issues related to women and sort of equality, not just in the workplace, but sort of in all different facets of our society. So those are bills that we'll be really hoping to put a lot of energy into in the coming weeks. Same goes with a lot of criminal justice efforts. So there's a lot still to come, and I think you're absolutely right, Jason, that now that Medicaid has sort of been taken off the table, there's more time for lawmakers and advocates to dig in on other issues.
And especially on issues that are important to the ACLU, like you mentioned. We haven't seen a lot of criminal justice or the women's and gender equality issues come up yet, but hopefully they'll get the oxygen and the attention, and hopefully we'll get some bills passed. Okay, thank you very much, Marina, for being with us at the end of week 2. I can't believe it's still just week 2, but we'll be back in touch next week as things move forward. Thanks again.